Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 174, and this is another first of the podcast. I'm joined today by David O'Connor. David is in his car. First podcast guest that we've had in his car. David, how you doing?
I'm very good, sir. Thank you very much for having me on, and thanks for the intro and calling me out. Here I am in my office.
Mate, I love it. I love it. This is, this shows the true life as an S&C coach, doesn't it? The office is in the car.
Absolutely. And listen, there's no point in hiding it. I was going to put a little backdrop, but look, this is where I am. It's been a busy morning and a busy afternoon. But we were discussing there, like the audio is good, so we'll stay with us.
Mate, you can big up the brand of car because the acoustics are top quality. People spend all these tens of thousands on studios, and all you need is a car. That's all you need. But all honestly, mate, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. You put some great stuff out on socials. I know that's where we started interacting over on Instagram. So we're going to dive into some of that stuff in a little bit. But just kick us off, mate. S&C coach, running coach. Just take us through a little bit of background on yourself and what led up to you doing what you do right now.
Yeah, no problem. Well, look, first of all, just thanks very much for having us on. I think when I look at the caliber of guests you've had on, I feel a bit like Only Fools and Horses, you know, you're showing up dressed as Batman and Robin when it's a black tie party. So it's when I look at the list of names, you're like, wow, I'm now on that episode list. So no, listen, thanks very much for having us on. It's great to have a chat. And hopefully, I think the great thing as well, it just puts you in touch with other people and helps networking as well, sharing ideas. So it's brilliant. Regarding myself, yes, I think my background's probably a little bit unorthodox. I originally studied English and journalism when I finished school. So I was quite young when I did the Leaving Cert here, which is obviously the equivalent of your GCSEs. So I was 16 leaving school. So quite young going to college, and quite young, Jesus, in terms of deciding what you want to do with your life. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do the following Tuesday, never mind the rest of my days, you know. So I've always had an interest in kind of language, writing, and probably had an idea of wanting to be a kind of a sports journalist at one stage. So I think that's how I ended up going down that route. I do get asked a lot now, like, well, Jesus, you know, how does that tie in? That's very different. And why didn't you go down that route? You haven't utilised your qualifications. And you're sort of like, well, actually, I have, because you thought, like, English, it's, you know, the foundation of communication and the basis of connection and all. So you're utilising it every day. So it's absolutely something that served me well. It's been very transferable in different jobs I've had. And to be honest with you, the couple of years in college was the best time of my life in terms of just, you know, a bit more independence, getting a little bit more confident about yourself and all. So really important period of my life. From a sporting perspective, always been involved in football. My dad was an incredibly gifted footballer. There was definitely a mix-up in the genes somewhere. Then I don't know what went wrong, but he was superb. You know, geez, he played right through us up until he was about 43 or 44, until really bad injury brought an end to it. I think otherwise he'd still be playing. But I think just through him, you know, growing up, your dad's your hero. You see how much he loves it, how much he kind of puts into it. I just took a lot from that. And just from playing with local clubs. When I was young, I started training with him, which was a bit unusual. Like, you were calling, he was right full, I was right wing. You're calling him dad, looking for a pass, which was a bit odd. You know, I just took a lot from him, I suppose, in terms of the love of the game. And I think probably what he instilled with me was a kind of an appreciation for, you know, a kind of a professionalism when things are done right, when things are organised, and training with him with a senior team from such a young age, and seeing that structure is actually what gave me a love of coaching. Because it was great just arriving when you could see cones already, bibs were down, balls already pumped, and there was a really great buzz of it under the floodlights and all. It was brilliant. And funny enough, I took a lot more pleasure from that than actually playing. And kind of in getting into my 20s and all that, I just kind of realised I didn't really enjoy playing that much. It didn't bring the best out of me. It was like any issue I kind of had in my head, anything I was trying to deal with and was suppressed, came out in a really negative way in a football pitch. So I kind of stopped playing really young. I think I was 24 or so. I actually was like, no, do you know what? I prefer coaching because you have to be a bit more responsible and take care of yourself and take care of those you're coaching as well. So nothing is wasted. Like I said, the qualifications I'd had, the people I'd met, a bit more confident in myself. That's how I got into the coaching side of it. So probably started off more on the technical end of things. I think probably at that stage, the likes of Guardiola starting to come around, and everybody thought they could get every team in the world playing out from the back. I think within my first season of coaching, like within my first week, I was like, "Oh right, doesn't work for everybody." Right, lads, breaking ball, all about the breaking ball. So, yeah, kind of. Look, I mean, I probably picked it up, as I said, early 20s. More so technical side of it, but I was always really interested in, I suppose, the psychology of hard work and everything that was behind that. And probably this is a common thing, and I've heard this spoken about a lot on your podcast as well. Like, you're going to matches, but you'd arrive an hour early to watch the warm up and things like that, and see how, yeah, that was great. Jesus, I used to get booking games abroad. I wonder who have I not seen? Walk around, like, go to it and see what warm up they'll do. Like, so things like that. Suppose I'm going in all sorts of tangents here, Ben. I think it's all relevant, but it's aside from the love of football, I had the love of running as well. Did athletics in school, and that kind of was enough to keep me fit. But in terms of kind of tying the two together, you were sort of looking to sort of make it sort of marry the two together to say, right, what can I bring into football from athletics to help people? And that's kind of very early on. I was like, all right, let's teach people how to run. Let's try and specialize in that. So for 10 or so years, it's been something I've been trying to do. And it spiraled into other areas. It gave me a love of sort of fitness overall, starting off, like whether that was taking group sessions for fitness instruction, going into personal training, and then just getting really loved then for the strength conditioning side of things. And I've been very lucky. I've worked very hard in terms of doing analysis pieces. We're driving all around the country to get a foot in the door. I've managed and coached an under-18s team with Shells over here, really high standard, which has been great. I managed to work my way up to our first team, which was semi-professional. Took a bit of a break as became a dad. That's a bit of an endurance event as it is.
Tell me about it.
So it took a year or two out. And I might talk a bit about that later, Ben, because it was the best thing I ever did in terms of being a practitioner, because it sort of broke the habits. You probably get to a stage where you're repeating year after year and getting a bit too comfortable. So I think the break was actually one of the best things I ever did. And then for the last sort of year and a half now, I've been involved in a senior women's team. Same club, been very, very lucky. And I run my own practice, as I said, strength and conditioning, and predominantly helping sort of field-based athletes how to run and work on their technique, work on their speeds. And yeah, here I am doing my masters as well. So it's a full plate. It's that's my life story, and that's probably filled an hour, Ben, has
it? No, do you know what, mate? There's some really nice lessons in there. And I think to just take you right back to what you said at the start in terms of sort of qualifications, you're dead right with what you said. Like, we have to make a decision about career very early, don't we? And I don't think anyone truly knows that I'm going to end up doing this when I'm 30, 40 years old. Like, I don't think anyone can put be so precise on what they're going to go into. But the way that you looked at it and the way that you treated it in terms of taking skills from regardless, whatever it is, I've spoke to people that have done things that seem like they're nothing to do with sports science, strength and conditioning, but you can always take something. And I think if there's anyone listening that's at that age, coming out of school, going through college, like having to make those decisions, I think that is a massive takeaway from yourself and others, that you don't have to know what you're going to go into, but you just have to take lessons from what you do, don't you? And whether it is English or whether it is journalism or whatever it is, there's always something in there that we can take forward into future roles.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, look, even from an S&C perspective, I mean, I'm touching 40 now, a bit too close to 40 than I like to be. But like, when I left school, there was no such thing. we didn't know what S&C was. So it wasn't as if you were leaving saying, I know, I'm going to do this. So, no, you find your path. And I think it's a good lesson, maybe, particularly with young footballers. And in terms of what we do, whether it's gym-based or pitch-based, just giving them a little bit more as well to, like, look, squatting with a dumbbell isn't everything. The barbell isn't everything. There's more going on here, and not to get too dogmatic about things either, and keep yourself sort of open with the person in front of you, and keep them open. Don't get things narrow with them. That's something you have to do this. You must do that. You don't have to do anything.
No.
Really don't. Like some of the most important things you'll talk to young footballers. I call this the Netflix test. If you don't know what your athlete is watching on Netflix after the first session, you have failed. So, there's so much going on, and you're dealing, particularly with me, I deal with a lot of young athletes, and you're not going to tell them here in 20 years you're going to be doing this, because you got to nurture it. They might find something through an S&C coach or through a football coach that sets a spark of light that brings them in another direction in life in a positive manner. Might be anything to do with football.
Yeah.
And if they do find it, great, job done. So, there's so many silos to it, isn't there? Without a doubt, and I think I've probably learned as I got a bit older to just relax and try and enjoy the journey as it goes. The effort is the reward. That's one of my favorite quotes. I think it's a nice sort of way to look at things, not to get too caught up in the end game all the time. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, perfect. And I wanted to ask, because we've done a few podcasts recently with practitioners working with semi-professional, part-time players. And it seems there's a lot of listeners that are in that same sort of situation. So I wanted to have a little chat about yourself, because obviously having the experience in that, but also at first team level and academy level as well. Talk to us a little bit about working in a part-time program, maybe some of the benefits, maybe your approach to working with part-time players.
Yeah, I think, we use the term semi-pro over here. Like it's an awful term. It just kind of makes it sound like you're only halfway in, and it's very much professional. It's very much professional. I think probably the payment for the guys involved is probably what sums it up in terms of being, semi-professional. But it's quite intense with semi-professional football. And I think it's just because when you're grabbing the slice of the pie, there's only so many slices you can grab. The aim is obviously with a manager, they just want to win on a Friday. They want to win, players want to play, and they want to make sure they have a contract. Over here, your contracts are quite short. You might get a year deal. So nothing is secure or set in stone. There's obviously so much pressure involved in terms of people paying in to watch you. You've got TV coverage. And I think a lot of them growing up maybe aren't coached on that. It's not something that comes into a coaching element, a sort of a well-rounded kind of well-being program. Hopefully that's something that can change. So there's a lot of pressure, and I think in terms of what we do, you have to pick your battles. I mean, I know when I first went in, just being naive, you try and be all things to everybody. And I think we've probably all made this mistake. Like you want to be the nutritionist, the psychologist, the S&C coach, the warm-up guy, helping the physio. You want to do everything, and you kind of realize very quickly, like, what, I have to narrow this down a little bit and just be good at one or two things. So I suppose, to give an example with the first team men, I kind of realized very quickly, like, the touch points are so limited. Like, just simple things. Let's get this warm-up right. And adapt it as, and that's really, really simplistic. Let's adapt as we go. But a week, what do we need to change? What do I need to get ready for in terms of the session that's ahead? Get that right. Do it quietly. Do it with a little bit of love and a bit of energy. And your job is done, and they'll respect you for it. What we did then, I'm trying to think back, because I'm going back 5 or 6 years here. In terms of the gym piece, it's not something it's not part of the culture here. You'll never see a schedule that's like, training, gym on a Monday, pitch session Tuesday. And that's no one's fault. That's just where we are. I think it is kind of changing gradually. Now, what I will say, especially with the senior men, like, there is a fashion, obviously, in terms of going to the gym and looking after yourself. I think getting lads into a gym is never a problem. I think getting them out of the gym can be the real problem sometimes. But again, you know, you're okay. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn as well, and give them your input. But don't try and override everything, or you know, you're not trying to be the boss. You're trying to be assistants. You're trying to be there to help. And some people take your help, some won't. But in terms of, because that wasn't part of the actual, I suppose, the official structure, you're doing a lot sort of ad hoc. You're doing a lot out of the time that's actually allocated to you, which can be enjoyable. Obviously, you're young, you're so enthusiastic, but I think you learn as you grow older. You're like, man, this is eating into a serious amount of time. Like, so the kind of, I think the second year then I sort of realized, right, how can we sort of make this work collectively? So there was a spare room available in the home grounds that used to be a gym, which unfortunately got destroyed in the flood. But the room was still available. So right, we picked up like some like secondhand equipment, rollers, couple of weights, couple of benches, and just got what we could into it. And I said, what we tried to do then was match nights when we were there, the guys were arriving 2 hours early. Yes, utilize this space. So you got in touch with the senior guys first to get down, start rolling, doing their mobility work, and started using it as almost like a chill out area before they went up then for the meetings. And a little thing like that, it was the smallest thing in the world, but you got 2 or 3 buying into it. And sure, before long, the whole squad were down there doing that little bit of work then. And it's better than sitting in the dressing room scrolling through a phone for an hour and a half waiting for the manager's meeting. So that's what I mean. I suppose anyone who's younger listening, like, and they are looking, I know, like, even for me, like, that whole going in with the first team, this is amazing. Like, if I was asked to go back now, I wouldn't, because I feel it's something I've done. And I think somebody else could go in now and do something a hell of a lot better than what I did. But if you're young and you're looking to go down that direction, if it's a semi-professional setup or otherwise, like, just pick your battles, pick 1 or 2 little wins that you can bring to that team, and then just chip off the little individual bits when people are gonna look for a little bit of help. Because you don't have to change the world. I think we do, but you don't have to. So I hope that answers your question a bit in terms of the semi-pro setup, Ben.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. And I think it's really important, isn't it, to look at a program and what's currently in place. You highlighted the warm-up, which is something that everyone's going to do, but there's not everyone utilizing it. So it's something that's already set in place. Like, players will do that before every game, but making fine tweaks to it, like you said, can be really impactful, can't it? And it's something you can go in and change straight away without it being so obvious. Whereas other things like trying to put a strength program in place or whatever it is, that might come later. But it's going to be a little bit more obvious, isn't it, to such a big change in the schedule. So I think that's a great bit of advice for anyone that's going into a similar sort of situation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and again, like, look, I'm happy to pass on all my mistakes to others so they can learn, you know. And Jesus, I look forward to making many more, because there'll be loads more along the way. But you're dead right, actually, just about the strength piece. So say this is my second year with the senior girls now. And last year, very much a conditioning role. And we obviously had a phase last year through lockdown where gyms weren't opening. So you're obviously doing your best with what's available in terms of the time resources on the pitch. Whereas this year now, we have that access. We have the gym available on the campus where we're training. And you're slowly now trying to they've access to the gym on training nights. Most of them train the gym anyway. A lot of them, we do have programs. But rather than jumping in straight away and saying, listen, we have this gym now before training, this is what you're all doing. They're like, you know what? Let them go in and just get a feel for the place first. And if they go in and sit in a bike for 20 minutes, fine. They're in the gym, they're getting a feel for it. They know the staff there. They'll get an idea of sort of how busy it is, what space is available. And that's fine. Just let that grow organically. When they're more comfortable, then we'll sort of sit in and say, right, are you doing your program? What do you like about that gym? Is there any equipment you like? Anything you'd love to try? And nurture it that way. Give them 2 things to do. And that's, again, people may give a different approach and say you might need to go in hard and heavy, but I just know with the athletes I work with, I know their nature. I know the space they need sometimes, because I'd be the same. I think definitely going to a new place, you want to be given a little bit of breathing space, and just assess it, you know, after a couple of weeks, especially now, like, you're only back in pre-season. You already have the likes of myself and the other coaches hammering them on the pitch to, you know, to prepare for the season. So, you know, just take your time with it. I think that's what I'd be doing this year anyway. But it's still progress. You know, having that access in a training night is really big progress for us.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the difference from your perspective in your role, from working with academy and then to a semi-professional first team to like full-time first team. And I know you're with the girls now, like some of the differences, but not in terms of like the athletes you're working with, but from your role, maybe the way that you speak, maybe the way that you behave, like what are the main differences?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the academy role, it's definitely more of you present yourself more of a developer as such. It's more of you're a development coach. And what I mean by that is it's not just a strength piece. It's not just a conditioning piece. You're nurturing people. It's definitely less intense. I think it's definitely more engaging. And you definitely get that more time in terms of talking to the people. And whether that's the athlete or the parent, if you can build a good relationship with a parent as well, I think it helps because you create this triangle then where everybody's working to help this young person. And that could be conversations about exactly what we said at the start about school. What's going well in school? What do you want to do when you're finished? Is there letting that side? Maybe I could get a bit of information for you or see who's the right person to talk to. I've always enjoyed that about the academy side of the thing. Now, again, my own experience, I've only really worked from sort of 16 to 18, that age group, in terms of our academy and our youth section, but definitely less intense, more engaging, and a bit more sort of open in terms of where you can go with the conversations and helping people. And like you say, just because when you go to first team, it's just so ruthless, it can be quite callous. I think we forget sometimes football, particularly at the high level. So I'd say it's like the corporate world with lights and an audience. Like it's ruthless. And I think even as in terms of what we do, we need to remember that as well. So yeah, look, just being there and being kind of an all-rounder for somebody. I think, like, look, you can't be the hero. I understand that, but we've two sets of ears, as they say, and one mouth. So listen to what people say.
And what about moving into like a more of a first team role? Like how would your behaviors, your language and that change in that sort of a role?
Yeah, I think the approach I took was I know I'm quite chatty here and I'm quite relaxed chatting to you, but I do tend to, I'm very good at taking a step back to observe and get a reading of an audience. Or get a reading of a group in the dressing room. And I think when I did that first with the first team, I tried to just sit back a little and tried not to say too much. I think I got so insecure about myself, I probably started talking too much. And that's what I said. That's what I tried to be. You try to be Batman. You want to be the hero, the Cape Crusader. And that's a mistake I made. I talked too much going up when I think put into that situation again, I would have taken a little bit more time just to listen and just to see what was going on. And that's little things to see who's the shining light in the dressing room, who's the one they listen to, who's the one that's really quiet, who do they not listen to, little things like that. And who's putting on a show, because you always know there's someone that's maybe a little bit mouthy, bit of banter or whatever, but behind it all, like, Jesus, this fella's struggling. So definitely going up with the girls, I was a bit more patient. I think that I spoke earlier about the break. I think just having a bit of time away probably encouraged that as well, to see, okay, what has maybe changed here? Let's have a look at this group and see. And I think, like, as well as that, you got to remember, like, it's 10 months of a season. It is a long, long season. Like, you don't have to solve the world's problems in the first week or two that you're there, So don't be afraid to stand back. Say that to any young coach. Just stand back and have a little look. And like I say, you don't have to go in with a megaphone to reinvent the wheel in the first couple of days or weeks.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. I think that's really, really important, isn't it? And that's been the message where I've spoke to a lot of coaches going into a new environment. Coaches in the MLS, going into Football League over in England, and it always comes back to the same thing, that taking that approach of sort of stepping back and evaluating the situation is so important. Like you say, and to capture the phrase that Damien Hughes uses a lot, you're looking for the cultural architects, the cultural assassins. in the dressing room, which everyone knows. And when I think of that, I always go back to the 90s Man United team and think of the likes of the maybe 2000s, Roy Keane, people like that. They're the ones that sort of stand out. But if we scale that down a little bit, there's those characters in every changing room, isn't there? And you're right, noticing those, realizing who they are, the different traits of each person, whoever it is you're working with, is so important to your role, isn't it? And then how you approach each person.
Big time. And the other thing, and we're all the same here, is that you got to remember that people will behave differently in a group than when they're individual as well. So you might change your tone a little bit or change your approach when you're talking to somebody on their own, because they might open up a little bit more. They might be a little bit more comfortable. I'd kind of be like that. I'd be very comfortable with sort of a group of 2 or 3. But sometimes a group of 30, it's like, oh my God. It's like I might just sit at the back here. Like, so I can understand as well, like if people in a football setting, especially if you have those big personalities, it can be easier to just sit back and let them do the talking. Again, like we talk about fatherhood, you think about like if you've 2 kids and the first one's a blabbermouth, the second one doesn't say anything.
Have you been in my house?
There you go. It's like, why isn't he talking? It's like, well, he can't get a bloody word in with the other one.
Yeah, mate, it's such a good point as well. On the group as well, like I just think about like a classroom at a school, and you always have those few characters, don't you, that are either at the front talking or the loud mouths, and then you have probably the biggest percentage of the rest of the class that stay quiet. And that doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. It just means that they're not raising to the level of everyone else. And you can cross that over into a team setting 100%, can't you? And a coach setting. So if you think about going to a conference or a seminar, whatever it is, it's exactly the same, isn't it? So I think it's a really important point that you bring up there, that everyone's different and everyone's different in different situations as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember a few years ago, the first team men, we were going through a bit of a bad spell results-wise, and it was one of them, everyone in the dressing room for an hour afterwards, trying to dissect the situation. And one player was he was nailing a lot of players for kind of saying, like, look, yous look as if you don't care when we lose. And to be fair, one of the younger lads actually stood up and he just said, look, just because I don't come in kicking bottles and throwing the fridge around, he's like, doesn't mean I don't care. He says, I just handle it differently. He said, yeah. I'm tormented in my head here, he says, but he says, I'm not the type of person that comes in shouting and roaring. He says, but I'm still hurting as much as you are. And I was delighted for him because he's only a young lad. He's 18, 19. And I thought, like, fair play to you, like, Jesus, because that took balls,
Yeah.
But it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. It's the dynamic, the makeup of any group. It's always the same. And I think what you'll often find as well, like, I think a lot of the time we're so terrible at making these judgments, like Jesus, yeah, he's very quiet, that fella, and then suddenly you realise he's an absolute lunatic when you give him a week or two, like.
Yeah.
Well, listen, that's why we do what we do as well. It's just people, isn't it? People are fucking amazing. They'll never fail to amaze. They'll never fail to drive you mental, but they'll never fail to amaze you either,
100%. Mate, I wanted to talk about something that we got into a chat about on socials as well, about robustness, because I think it's obviously a really key topic. When you think about building robust players, what are some of the sort of things that spring to mind? Like what are you trying to develop?
So this can break into 2 sections, like, but if you think of robust and you even look that up in a dictionary, it's strong and healthy. We talk about being vigorous. Now let's talk about the gym piece, just for example, that if you were getting a young player into the gym, and look, I'm conscious of this, you don't want to make this all about the gym set, because the pitch, the football, everything is all together. But I suppose, for example, if you're trying to build a habit with a young player and they're a bit iffy about the gym, if you talk about buy-in, how to sell that, you can talk about before we even talk about building muscle and protecting your bones, all that good stuff. Let's talk about headspace. Let's talk about stress relief. Let's talk about building a routine, and let's talk about building new skills. All that is building a robust mind. While you're building that, you're going to build your muscle. You're going to bone health, tendon health, and you're going to feel good and feel stronger in your body. So that's your robust body. And those 2 things together, and this is the tagline for my own business, It's your strong body and conditioned mind. And if you can get the two of them working together, that's what makes robustness. That's an individual. You put that into a team then. Okay, we have to do our running. It is not nice. We have to do a little bit of work in pre-season. Nobody likes it. There's absolutely no joy in it. People think you're a bit of a sadist because you love to put this stuff out here. You don't. You do it because it serves a purpose. But still, at the same time, getting them to run up and down in straight lines with a ball or otherwise, it's not going to create, it's not going to get that. You need a little bit more, which I think is why you need to get them kind of, I'm careful with saying it, don't make it sound like Conor McGregor and MMA or like grappling, but a few shoulders, a little bit of resistance, a bit of chaos, I think was the word we spoke about when we first brought this up. Just to bring a little bit of chaos about it so that when the game comes around and the serious stuff, I kind of use the line, you're unexpecting the expected. Where things are becoming a little bit, all right, this is chaos, but we train for this all the time. It's fine. So you combine a couple of things like that together. I always say in terms of the running piece, a 3-point start isn't going to win you a title. It won't win you a game. When have you ever seen 11 footballers line up into the 18-yard box for a 3-point start and wait for a gun to go off? It just doesn't happen. It's a nice tool, obviously, in terms of if you're looking to walking a little bit of a push off season or something like that. But it's not the chaos that the game is. We need to try and make it a little bit more realistic at points. Now, I don't think you do this every minute of every training session, but throw in a couple of surprises. There's things that people won't like. Okay, might get them shouldering each other, holding each other back for the resistance. So sometimes as well, even you can get them sort of close to close, head to head, even shouting at each other. Why not? Because that's going to happen in a game. Little things like just reactions with the whistle and all, decisions going against you. Why? Because it's what's going to happen in a game. The referee will give a lot against you. So you're trying to frustrate them a bit, but getting them to control that frustration, control that aggression and make it work in your favour. So I'm spiralling here a bit, Ben, because I'm getting a bit excited with all this stuff because I try and be a bit creative with it. If they're giving out to me with a smile on their face, that's when you know you've done your job. But look, you're just trying to build. You're trying to build them and prepare them mentally and physically for what's coming ahead. Because, like I said, it's ruthless. It is absolutely ruthless.
If we work through the sort of ages and groups that you've worked with and relate it to those groups, like the academy, you just brought up at the start then about creating habits and getting used to going into the gym environment. Obviously, we are talking more about the strength side, what you've just said about robustness being strong and healthy. Getting into that routine obviously ticks both boxes, doesn't it? You've talked about sort of the mental health side, the stress relieving, and then that's without even touching on all the physical benefits that you get from being in there. So there's obviously that like academy level, and then working up to a first team level. There's that and more, isn't there? And that's what we've got to try and think about when we're trying to create this. It isn't just solely about dealing with chaos. There's a lot of things going on, isn't there, that we're preparing players for?
That's it. Well, I'm talking about chaos on the pitch there, but your routine is chaos. Life is chaos. And
yeah,
like you spoke about some of the content I do on social media. I always try and bring up stuff that's relevant to a really hectic schedule. I get a lot of stick for it because you couldn't possibly cause 2 exercises a program. It's like I can because it's real. This is practical. This is the real world. If someone has 20 minutes available, you got to utilize that 20 minutes. And particularly over here, you still have a lot of players who are multi-sport, or because they're on a scholarship in college or university, they still have to play for their university team. So you could have guys playing 3 games a week, training 5 times a week. Like it's chaos. It's insane, kind of what goes on. And we talk. The easy thing to do there as an S&C coach, oh Jesus, this is an absolute. Look at the workload these guys. And it's not for you to dictate what their workload is because they have a lot on their plate. They have to play for the college because they're being paid to go. Like, that's the reality of it. You can't say to them, don't play that game. So in taking what they might have, and I'm just this is all hypothetical, by the way, there's not one individual I'm talking about, but this is where you can step in and say, right, you've had a heavy week. Talk to me about what's been good about your week. What do you like about it? Don't start with Jesus. That looks awful. Ask what you like about it, it's pretty full on because I think about myself as an 18-year-old. If I was playing football every day, I'd probably, like, I in my elements, and it's important you're not painting the whole thing as a penance, because some people love it. They're like, you're grand, listen, it's great. If I could get another session in, I would. But I always try and start with what's good about. That's sort of my opening line is, what's been good about this? What are you enjoying about it? And it doesn't matter how hectic it may seem on the outside to us. Try and find a little point that maybe they enjoy and work from that then in terms of the solutions.
Brilliant, mate. And we've talked there from a player perspective, and I've saved this topic till last because I think it's the most important. I was going to go into this first, but I feel like saving this till last sort of brings everything together, and it's such an important topic that we need to speak about more. And it's dealing with depression. And I know it's something that you've talked about before, but what I wanted to discuss is about, as practitioners, as coaches, just as people in general that are dealing with other people, the sort of things we can be aware of, the things we can do to support one another. And I think it's a really interesting but really crucial conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look, I mean, I suppose, look quickly on my own situation. I speak very openly about my therapy. I talk about it, a session, the same way I talk about a gym session. I'm 20 years plus trying to look after my head, into psychiatry, on medication, and obviously I train and look after myself as best I can as well, and all those little things chip together to make sure I'm at my best. And being a coach helps me be at my best. Like I say, I know you're responsible for other people's health and well-being as well. So I'm always very open, and I feel as a coach, if I can be open, it might help players and individuals. Jesus, if the coach can feel like that and he's in this role of responsibility, maybe it's okay for me to kind of talk about it as well. I'm very lucky with the club, with Shells, to take it very seriously, and they're very open and encouraging when it comes to any sort of speak about mental health, when it comes to player well-being, or even supporters, people involved with the club. They're very vocal about it, and they've tried to create this kind of open space and this safe space in terms of people coming forward. Now, I think we talk about mental health awareness. I'm conscious about this, and I'm conscious of the audience as well. Mental health awareness exists 100%. We all know, particularly the last 2 years of what we've all lived through, everybody definitely is a bit more open and accepting to a conversation about somebody not feeling great in themselves, because none of us have been at our best the last 2 years. But that said, I think what's often portrayed in the media, or a lot of the stories, it can be very sort of clean cut. It can be very vanilla. That, listen, once you get your 5 fruit and veg a day, a bit of fresh air, and 8 hours sleep, sure, everything will be great. And sometimes it's just, they're all great things, and I'm not knocking it in any way, shape or form, but sometimes it's just not that easy.
Yeah.
We spoke there about routine, about pressure, about the ruthlessness sometimes in the game. And for me, being involved in football, and that when I was younger, it still didn't save me from sort of spiraling in terms of the journey I've been on. I still have my darkest days, despite being involved in football and being involved in sport all my life. So it's sort of, we need to be careful as to sort of how you can't provide the absolute solution to people and sort of say like, oh no, well, here's what you need to do. And it goes back then to just listening to people, and not being afraid to say to somebody like, look, listen, I don't have the answer, but I will listen to you. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just listening to people is enough, because we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists. And I'm not even talking about us, as an S&C practitioner. I'm just talking as people,
Yeah.
in terms of being involved in football. There are specialists in this area. But the majority of young players, their coach is the guy they look up to. And I was the same as younger. You're looking up to, you think these guys are gods. If you're that safe haven, you're the guy that'll give them an ear. They'll remember that, and they will feel comfortable talking to you. They will feel comfortable, even going as far as saying, "Oh, look, I've had a shit day." And sometimes that's enough. That's all you need to hear. Mm-hmm. So yeah, look, I'd be open to anybody. I really would. I don't have all the answers, but absolutely, it just says someone, look, talking to somebody is the hardest thing you'll ever do. But I think the biggest thing to kind of remember is when you talk to someone, it's a solution you're searching for. You're not looking to bring a problem to somebody, you're just looking for a solution. And I think that could be a kind of a nice way as an intro to maybe ask for help. So look, it's hard for people, there's no doubt about it, and there's a lot of pressure. You've got a generation that have missed out on a year and a half of football, a year and a half of, developing social skills of just face-to-face interaction. And then you're thrown back into that situation where you're in a dressing room surrounded by people. So that's what I say about not even about when you're new in a role, just taking a little step back, maybe just to have a look and see, is there somebody that's off? Is there somebody behaving a different way? And you don't have to get too heavy, but just ask them how that day was. Ask them how everything's going. How's college going? What are you watching on Netflix? Go back to that one as well. So you've got to look out. Yeah, you've got to look out for people. I don't know. You'd like to think maybe, like from an education perspective, this is something that might come on board with universities in terms of what we do with S&C Sport Science, that there could be a module developed where you are kind of honing in completely on people's well-being in a sort of, I don't want to say an official capacity, but in a structured capacity, rather than just listening to some idiot like me telling you to listen and look out for somebody, So I don't know, maybe you might have a thought on that, Ben, if you, because I'd like to hear someone else's perspective on this from a coaching side, like.
Mate, I think it's such an important thing. And the fact of the matter is, like we just spoke about, we're dealing with people. Like, forget the fact that footballers, we're dealing with people, or they could be players, they could be coaches, they could be anyone. We're dealing with people. But to take it back to football, and I know literally last week, I think it's Crystal Palace have now got out this, I don't know whether it's a scheme or I'm not sure what it is, but they're helping players that now get released. And that's real. That's what you're going to deal with as a coach, as an S&C coach. You're going to deal with players that don't get contracts, that end up in what they see as bad situations. So people are going to be low. There's going to be times when they're low. And forget even the contracts. There's going to be times where you've got a group of players where you do have some players that are flying, that are feeling great. But within a group, there's always going to be a few that aren't feeling as good as what they should. And I think it's so important to have these conversations and make coaches aware that when you've got a group of 20, 30 players in front of you, it goes back to what we talked about before. They're individuals. People behave differently in groups to individual. And what you've talked about time and time again, which I think is so important, is the fact of having these conversations, but more importantly is listening to what they're saying. And just to extend on that as well, it might not be that you get in a conversation with them where you can actually listen, but watching and being aware, like you can see when people aren't 100% at it, can't you? Like there might be someone behaving a little bit differently in terms of what they're doing in training or whatever. And you, as a coach, not to say this is your only job, because obviously there's a lot of responsibility going on anyway, but just being aware of this sort of thing and discussing it more. And we don't have enough conversations, do we, about this sort of thing, and make people aware on, and maybe obviously without talking about names, discussing instances that have happened where you've been like, this player is normally like this. They normally speak in this way. They normally act in this way. And on this day they didn't. And I did this. And I think that's maybe what's needed more, just more conversations about it, which will help people in the long run.
Yeah, good point. And yeah, I suppose I even tying in like simple things and say, in terms of the well-being piece relative to what we do as conditioning coaches, like your RPE scheme. Like if you're running that and you see somebody with an 8, 9 or 10 for 4 nights in a row or something, you're thinking, oof, hang on a second. So like even things like that, you'd be encouraging people just to be honest about. I was just thinking off the top of your head there, Ben, of just kind of little ways that you can sort of help maybe monitor the situation. Just based on obviously some people would have access to technology and that in terms of the teams they're dealing with. It could be the GPS piece. If somebody's usually sprinting left, right and centre and they're not, it might not be that they're not putting the work in. It could be just the head's a bit all over the place or whatever it may be. Like so, but definitely I think as even as backroom staff, as support staff, I don't think we can be ignorant to that stuff. I do think it's a big part of our role. In terms of developing people, not even developing people, just being a coach. Like that's what you're there for. You look after people and make sure everybody's doing okay. Because look, if we were feeling pretty shit about something there in the night, you'd like to think one of the other staff would maybe come to you and ask you if you were all right as well. So, and again, I think a big driver probably now, like for me, is you think of yourself as an 18-year-old as well, and you'd like to think as a coach you looked up to that they'd come to you maybe if you were a little bit shy about asking. So, but even the Crystal Palace thing, I think I see it was like the aftercare plan or something. It's brilliant to see, and it's actually quite remarkable. You think 2022, and you're only seeing something like that in the Premier League now. So you'd like to think that's something that will become the norm very quickly. So it'll be interesting, even in a year's time, maybe speak to someone in the club and see how the success of it has been or how it's been received. I think that would be interesting to see. But look, it's despite it being late, it is great to see.
The other thing with that, David, obviously that's for players, which is great because players get basically sold the dream a lot of the time, don't they? And when things don't go according to plan, obviously it is a massive psychological issue for a lot of players, that when they have this contract that's just out of reach and then that gets taken away, you can understand completely. But to talk from a coach perspective, there's coaches that are having jobs snapped away from them. Like there's coaches that are in positions in the Premier League or whatever it is, a manager leaves and then they're out of work. So I hope in the future, this is also something that's available for coaches. Because like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's players, coaches, like it doesn't matter what the role is, it's people. So this sort of stuff should be available for anyone.
Yeah. And again, my own experience, this is why I've plucked up a bit of courage in the last year to start networking and connecting with other coaches, because I hadn't done it previously. And again, it wasn't arrogance or anything. It wasn't done out of a lack of confidence. It was because of a lack of confidence, where you were basically, oh my God, I better not message that guy. Like, he'll look at me and think I'm an idiot. He won't learn anything from me. Like, why would he want to hear from me? Whereas now it's like, I'll get in touch with anyone in the hope like you can have a chance, have a chat. And if you can build up your own little network, I think it does give you, it gives you someone to talk to in a similar vein. Like you say, if you are let go or you're struggling financially, you're struggling business-wise, you have someone to bounce off within our industry, because as you know, outside of what we do, some people don't really get it or don't really understand what we do. So definitely, if you have your own small network, and like, I'm not talking about joining unions and this, that, and every single, group that's available. If you just get 2 or 3 people you can bounce off, I think it will be a help in terms of talking about, as you say, whether it's your career progression or just setbacks or anything in terms of the industry or what we do, because it's tough going, Ben, as you know.
Mate, it is. But the other thing with that is that all practitioners are facing very similar battles, aren't they? So exactly. The fact that you can have that discussion with someone and be like, oh, so you feel the same way? Yeah, I do. Well, not that it's going to correct the issue, but it aligns you a little bit more, doesn't it? You understand, and you can have these discussions, and it just opens up some good quality conversations. And I think that's the important factor. It happens all the time when we have our network meetings, that coaches will bring up like a challenge that they're facing and be surprised that everyone else around the table says the same thing. And I think it just needs to happen more.
And you need to bring a network meeting to Dublin, Ben. That's exactly what you need to do.
Mate, I'd absolutely love to. So we'll get that in the books.
You can host it in my sitting room. No problem.
Brilliant. I'll take you up on that one, mate. David, I really appreciate you going into that, because it's a really, really important topic, and it needs to be covered more. So thank you very much for being so open with that. I really appreciate it. We'll just wrap things up on the podcast with some of the quick fire questions. I always say with these, you don't have to be so quick fire, so don't worry about, you've not got a time limit or anything like that. Just to start with, who are some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Yeah, look, I think I mentioned me dad, and again, I think it's a common answer with coaches, but he's like I say, I just learned so much from growing up. He's a very very old-fashioned sort of mindset, quite stoic actually, and he's very, very honest, very principled. I'll give you an example. Actually, he won a Player of the Year quite late in his career at some point, and like refused to accept it. He was like, "What? Why do you pick player of the year?" He's like, "It's a squad game. Like, why would you pick one person?" And he wouldn't take it. And like, he wasn't being an arsehole about it. He was generally just like, "This is a really strange award. I can't be accepting that." Like, he was almost embarrassed, you know, that way. Like, so it's just going to give you an idea of his mindset. Like, but even now, I mean, he's late 50s now. He's works for himself. He works six days a week, plays his golf, lives the quiet life. But even now, like, I still kind of I admire him so much. So he's been massive. And then, like, there's another guy, just quickly, Ben, I'm conscious of the time. There's a friend of mine, Dave Curran. He's actually a former tutor of mine. He was a tutor in college, actually. I studied English. And he's actually remained a really close friend since. And he's kind of my mentor in every aspect of life. And an unbelievable manager and coach. And this guy's never done a coaching badge in his life. He's never done any qualification, man. But just, we talk about just getting people together and believing in. So he just has that with a group. And he is superb, like, absolutely superb, no matter who he's working with. And again, that's probably the teacher background in him. And probably, again, another industry we could probably learn something from. But he's one of my closest friends, and someone I just kneel on in a lot of areas of my life. And someone I'd be lost without. So those two people, absolutely massive influences for me.
Brilliant. And what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
Yeah. Oh, this is the part where I was supposed to say soft skills, aren't they? That's what we all understand.
No, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah. It's an awful term, isn't it? Like, you don't go around saying, "Yeah, my flaccid skills are fantastic." Like, they need to change that term. Two things. Sorry, that's a really in joke, isn't it? Let's slag our soft skills. I think we all think we're better than we are sometimes with it, but it is important. I'm gonna get a load of bleeding threats after this, Ben. Look, we take ourselves very seriously as practitioners. We get wrapped up in numbers and percentages. We have to take the piss out of ourselves every now and again.
100%.
Definitely. So no, look, there's two things on a serious note. I think simplicity is one of them. Just keeping things really, really simple. I've always tried to do that. I do like to be creative and have a bit of fun, but I just try and keep things really simple. And I look genuinely specifically on the soft skills piece, just connection, like just being there, making that connection, and sort of knowing how to do it and when to do it. And that's come with time. I think I spoke a lot about kind of taking a stand back and watching and observing. So that's come with practice. But I'd like to think it's something I'm good at. Maybe I'm not. You could have some of my athletes listening to this saying, "What is that fella talking about?" But it is something I'm trying to improve on. And I think genuinely, like, look, all jokes aside, I think it is something a lot of coaches, we are all very clued in with and very clued in to kind of get better at and improve at all the time. And it's important. Without a doubt, it's important. But yeah, hope that answers your question.
Definitely. And then last one, which will be interesting with everything that you've got going on and the masters and everything. But in terms of CPD, what's your approach? Like, how do you go about continually learning and progressing as a practitioner?
Jesus, yeah, Google Ads sees me coming. They throw anything at me. Yeah, I think traditionally I've tried to do like kind of one a year. You look at something maybe to do one a year. Pre-COVID, obviously, I would have gone to a lot of seminars, things like that, a lot of network meetings. Hopefully now that's something we can get back to. The Masters is obviously, it's massive. So if I'm honest with you, this year is probably taking a bit of a back seat, looking at other courses, understandably. What was the most recent one I did? The Exos Performance Specialist one. I really enjoyed. I just found that a real paint by numbers, just follow it at your own pace. I really, really enjoyed that. I've done a couple of business ones. There's a guy over here, Brian Keane Fitness. He's really good. He's helped me in terms of the business side. Sam Peppers is another one, brilliant. He's doing a lot of great stuff in terms of mentorship and that. But look, I try and pick one a year, Ben, to be honest with you. And I think probably just, I'm trying to think in terms of advice to people, in terms of picking it. Obviously, due diligence is massive. Don't be blinded by an ad on Instagram. Do a little bit of research in terms of a course. And I think one thing to remember is that even if a course is sort of, if it's brilliant, it could still be a lot of money. So just make sure it's worth doing, relevant to what you're doing with your sport.
Yeah.
I've made that mistake where I have paid money, done this great course, and realised, you know what, actually, that probably wasn't that helpful. And you know what, it's okay to say that sometimes as well. I think sometimes we're almost afraid to say, oh shit, I better not say that wasn't relevant. It's not as if you're announcing it to the world. It's all a learning process. So yeah, just be patient if you are picking courses. And I think now there's so many available, so much available. So just be patient, take your time, do the due diligence, have a little look around, and just pick one. Don't go on an absolute mad one picking 4 or 5 courses to do at once, because it'll get messy. You won't finish them, and you won't finish them with your heart. You know that way. You won't do it properly if you start picking left, right, and centre. So just have a look at an area you're interested in.
Brilliant, mate. Well, thank you very much for giving up your time and coming on. This has been awesome chatting to you. Some really good information there and great advice for coaches as well. Just finish us up. Where's the best place to keep an eye on what you got going on?
Yeah, probably just my Instagram, performance_doc. No, sorry, I can remember your name. Performance_doc on Instagram. That's probably my weapon of choice. I'm not on Twitter or anything. But now look, I try and be really engaging and chat to people. So if anyone does want to get in touch, absolutely, please drop me a message, because I will. I'll probably reply to you within 10 seconds. Like, so do get in touch. As I said, the last year or so, I've taken a lot of time to try and talk to different coaches and that, just to see like what can be learned and get ideas and swap ideas. So always open to hearing from people, and having a bit of fun as well, having a laugh. It's important. We forget that sometimes.
Definitely, mate. Well, thank you very much for coming on, David, and giving up your time. It's been absolutely quality speaking to you, mate, and we'll stay in touch.
No, listen, it's brilliant, Ben. Thanks very much for having us. Thank you.